And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second Circle of Hell, Lust. I am Lynx from Norway, and with me, as always, I have my co-hostess.
Hello, I'm Katrina, and I'm from the UK. I hope you've all had a wonderful Sunday and a good evening to you.
Yes, and it's the first Sunday of Advent, so I do hope you have your first candle lit up for the 7, oh my god, the 4 weeks of waiting until Christmas. So yeah, the season has begun, and as you can see, we have moved into our Christmas castle, wonderfully decorated.
Yes, it is. Gotta get out the Christmas background. Gotta have a bit of seasonal decoration around the place.
Yeah, absolutely. With us so far, we have Illuminatus and the Paradox.
Hello.
Thank you to Revelations for hosting us on D-Live, and Yankee Apple and DDJ. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Yankee Apple, for the diamond there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, the circle that I do suppose everyone has been waiting for. I do think it is the one that is most well known for natural reasons. Though
yes.
this stream will not be X-rated, so sorry to anyone who was hoping for that. We will keep it seemly.
Yes, indeed. Get your mind out of the gutter.
Yeah.
Don't come here to be titillated.
No, but we do
Naughty.
have a few interesting stories for you, though. So, including one from real history, so that should be interesting to dive into.
Oh yes, they should be. And I didn't know about one particular pair that we are going to discuss, but they're an interesting couple.
Yeah, same for me. I came over them actually by Googling love stories. And I found them, so yeah.
And then of course we will be tackling a pair of very famous lovers, Tristan and Isolde.
Yeah.
What's DDJ got to say?
He is asking if it's the one about chocolate or cake. I do think that is the
No, that's gluttony, isn't it?
yeah, you might make the point that it's the bad substitute for
Mm.
Lost.
Yes.
So, but both chocolate and cake is very good. So yeah,
Do enjoy a bit of chocolate cake, and it's far less troublesome than the pleasures which tonight's cast of sorry sinners have
well,
indulged themselves in.
yeah, I won't make the claim that making you know, little bits of chocolate and everything is easy. It's quite an art, but it doesn't come to the point of the circumstances the people we will meet today had to face. So yeah, definitely a lesser evil. I
Yeah.
have tried my hands on making a bit of chocolate thingies over the years, so yeah.
It is quite fiddly. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah. So we are of course in Dante's second circle of hell for the wanton, aka lust. And we have already been through the gates of hell, the area where the non-committed are. You know, the people who really didn't do much either way in their life. And we've had the first circle of hell, which has been limbo for the virtuous pagans, and we've been in the castle of philosophy and met all of Dante's favorite philosophers and poets
Yeah,
just chilling out.
that was a name drop if there ever was one.
For sure.
I do suspect it was Dante fanboying a bit there. So yeah, but now the seriousness begins with the second circle.
This is where you go if you've been actually naughty.
Yeah. Okay, let's hear what Dante has to say about that.
Inferno, Canto 5. Thus I descended out of the first circle, down to the second, that less space begirds, and so much greater dole, that goads to wailing. There standeth Minos horribly and snarls, examines the transgressions at the entrance, judges, and sends according as he girds him. I say that when the spirit evil born cometh before him, wholly it confesses, and this discriminator of transgressions seeth what place in hell is meet for it, girds himself with his tail as many times as grades he wishes it should be thrust down. Always before him many of them stand. They go by turns, each one unto the judgment. They speak and hear, and then are downward hurled. O thou that to this dolorous hostelry comest, said Minos to me when he saw me, leaving the practice of so great an office, look how thou enterest, and in whom thou trustest. Let not the portal's amplitude deceive thee. And unto him my guide, why criest thou too? Do not impede his journey, fate ordained. It is so willed, there where there is power to do that which is willed, and ask no further question. And now begin the dulsome notes to grow, audible unto me. Now am I come, there where much lamentation strikes upon me. I came into a place mute of all light, which bellows as the sea does in a tempest if by opposing winds it is combated. The infernal hurricane that never rests, hurtles the spirits onward in its rapine, whirling them round, and smiting it molests them. When they arrive before the precipice, there are the shrieks, the plaints, the laments. They blaspheme the puissance divine. I understood that unto such a torment the carnal malefactors were condemned, who reason subjugate to appetite, and as the wings of starlings bear them on in the cold season in a large band and full, so doth that blast the spirits maledict. It hither, thither, downward, upward drives them. No hope doth comfort them for evermore, not of repose, but even of lesser pain. And as the cranes go chanting forth their lays, making in air a long line of themselves, so saw I coming, uttering lamentations, shadows borne onward by the aforesaid stress. Whereupon said I, Master, who are those people whom the black air so castigates? The first of those of whom intelligence thou fain wouldst have, then said he unto me, the Empress was of many languages. To sensual vices she was so abandoned, that lustful she made licit in her law, to remove the blame to which she had been led. She is Semiramis, of whom we read that she succeeded Nimus, and was his spouse. She held the land which now the Sultan rules. The next is she who killed herself for love, and broke faith with the ashes of Sychaeus. Then Cleopatra the voluptuous. Helen I saw, for whom so many ruthless seasons revolved, and saw the great Achilles, who at the last hour combated with love. Paris I saw, Tristan, and more than 1,000 shades did he name and point out with his finger, whom love had separated from our life. After that I had listened to my teacher, naming the dames of eld and cavaliers. Pity prevailed, and I was nigh bewildered. And I began, O poet, willingly speak would I to those two who go together, and seem upon the wind to be so light. And he to me, Thou'lt mark, when they shall be nearer to us, and then do thou implore them, by love which leadeth them, until they will come. Soon as the wind in our direction sways them, my voice uplift I, O ye weary souls, come speak to us, if no one interdicts it. As turtle doves, called onward by desire, with open and steady wings to the sweet nest, fly through the air, by their volition borne. So came they from the band where Dido is, approaching us athwart the air malign, so strong was the affectionate appeal. O living creature gracious and benignant, who visiting goest through the purple air, us who have stained the world incarnadine. If were the king of the universe our friend, we would pray unto him to give thee peace, since thou hast pity on our woe perverse. Of what it pleases thee to hear and speak, that will we hear, and will we speak to you, while silent is the wind, as it is now. Sitteth the city, wherein I was born, upon the seashore where the Po descends, to rest in peace with all his retinue. Love, that on gentle heart doth swiftly seize, seized this man for the person beautiful that was taken from me, and still the mode offends me. Love, that exempts no one beloved from loving, seized me with pleasure of this man so strongly, that, as thou seest, it doth not yet desert me. Love has conducted us unto one death. Cana waiteth him who quenched our life. These words were borne along from them to us. As soon as I had heard those souls tormented, I bowed my face, and so long held it down, until the poet said to me, "What thinkest?" When I made answer, I began, "Alas! How many pleasant thoughts, how much desire, conducted these unto the dolorous pass! Then unto them I turned me, and I spake, and I began, Thine agonies, Francesca, sad and compassionate to weeping make me. But tell me, at the time of those sweet sighs, by what and in what manner love conceded, that you should know your dubious desires? And she to me, There is no greater sorrow than to be mindful of the happy time in misery, and that thy teacher knows. But if to recognize the earliest root of love in us thou hast so great desire, I will do even as he who weeps and speaks. One day we reading were, for our delight, of Lancelot, and how love did him enthrall. Alone we were, and without any fear. Full many a time our eyes together drew that reading, and drove the colour from our faces. But one point only was it that o'ercame us. When, as we read of the much longed-for smile, being by such a noble lover kissed, this one, who ne'er from me shall be divided, kissed me upon the mouth, all palpitating. Galeotto was the book, and he who wrote it. That day no farther did we read therein, and all the while one spirit uttered this, the other one did weep so, that, for pity, I swooned away as if I had been dying, and fell, even as a dead body falls.
So, quite a canto, you could say. Imagine spending the eternity just blowing on the wind. That,
I know. They are in quite the situation. Never allowed to stop for a moment. And it's very metaphorical as well, because, of course, being caught up in a wind is pretty much exactly like being caught up in one's ever-changeable emotions.
yeah,
That is the state in which these people died.
indeed. And we've all heard the expression being swept off your feet and swept off by love and passion and all of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it is certainly an interesting canto, this. Because, of course, we get Dante and Virgil descending to this second circle of hell, which is considered the least bad of the actual sins. And of course, they hear Minos, and they see that he's a great beast, and the souls stand in front of him and confess their sins. And he wraps his tail around himself to determine the circle where the sinner belongs. Now, Minos, again, all the demons in hell seem to have an objection, don't they, to Dante being there. And Minos seems to indicate that he shouldn't trust Virgil in this. You know, because he tells him to take care of look how thou enterest and in whom thou trustest. Let not the portal's amplitude deceive thee. So, yeah. But Virgil again silences him by saying it's willed in heaven. And this place is completely dark. And it's like there's a giant storm roaring. It's really noisy in there. There's all sorts of moaning and shrieking, and they're whirled around by an unceasing storm. And indeed, they're the sinners doomed by carnal lust. And then we get to hear some of the stories of these sinners, which are certainly many and varied, are they not?
They certainly are. Looking into all of those stories, I do think we could have 1 hour at least of stories, if not more. Quite a bit more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the Gate Guardian here has his own set of stories, Minos. Because, of course, and I think it's quite fitting that Minos is in this circle, because he's famous for being the legendary ruler of Crete, who was helped there by the aid of the Greek god Poseidon, and then marrying Pasiphae, daughter of Helios, whom he had a lot of children by, but unfortunately also she was the mother of the Minotaur. And this was because Pasiphae was cursed by Poseidon to love a snow-white bull that had been sent to Minos for sacrifice, but Minos, instead of sacrificing, had kept it. So as punishment, Poseidon made his wife fall in love with a bull. And her child by the bull was the Minotaur, and it got shut up in the labyrinth. So I guess it's quite appropriate that he's wound up here, because he's definitely been cheated on.
Yeah. Poseidon do seem to be like one who likes to create chaos.
Well, he is the god of the sea.
Yeah.
And the sea is quite a chaotic place.
Yeah, it can
be. Yes. Minos got cheated on with a cow. Oof. Feels bad, man.
Yeah, of everything, a cow.
To be fair, though, it was Poseidon's fault. I don't think his wife would normally have those sort of weird attractions.
No, that do seem to be a feature of Greek mythology. With animals getting involved, not by their own fault, but by the gods. So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's all going to be some sort of metaphor for various truths about the universe within the Greek culture. But yes, Minos is, of course, known as very wise priest and legislator, but also someone who committed terrible sins himself. You know, sending Athenian children, 7 boys, 7 girls, to be fed to the Minotaur every, 9 years. So yeah, he's ended up as a head honcho in hell, and that's consistent with classical mythology as well, who said that he did go to be a judge in Hades.
Indeed. So, it does seem like Dante is keeping it to the tradition.
I suppose we should talk about the main couple that Dante talks to here. That being Francesca and Paolo. Now, there is a historical basis to this couple. And they're kind of from around Italy. I mean, as you can guess from the names Francesca and Paolo. And the actual name was Francesca da Rimini and Paolo Malatesta. And so the story generally goes like this. Francesca was married to Paolo's brother Giancotto. whose name that's not a word. Whose name meant crippled John. So yeah, he's not a very healthy sort of a man. Now, Francesca's shade tells Dante that her husband is destined for punishment in Cana, the realm of familial betrayal. And that is named after Cain, who killed his brother Abel. Now, the story runs that Francesca was the aunt of Guido Novella de Polenta, who was Dante's host in a place called Ravenna during the last years of his life. She was married, for political reasons, to Giancotto of the Malatesta family, rulers of Rimini. Now, Dante might actually have met Paolo in Florence. He might have met this guy whom he put in his poem in hell, which is a little bit
Cheeky.
awkward, but I suppose he can say what he wants about them because by the time he puts them in his poem, they'd been killed by Giancotto.
Still a bit cheeky, though.
Yes, it is a bit cheeky. But yeah, there's sort of a storification of this legend. So there's the account of a guy called Giovanni Boccaccio, a generation or two after Dante. He's providing a historical, in inverted commas, account of the events behind Francesca's presentation. So it's a bit soap opera. It's a bit Shakespeare. It's called the Decameron, and there's certainly an explanation of Dante's character's emotional sort of response to Francesca's story, because it presents her in quite a sympathetic light, really. Apparently, she was tricked into marrying Giancotto, who was disfigured and horrible. So they thought, oh dear, this young girl's not going to marry him. And they sent his handsome and elegant brother Paolo to stand in at the wedding. And so she sees him and is like, oh, great. I've been married to a handsome guy and I'm sure I love him and this is going to be great. And then after she signs the wedding contract, yep, wakes up with Giancotto next to her in the bed. And she's very angry. So she considers herself quite justified and really makes no attempt to restrain her affections to Paolo. And the two become lovers because, he reciprocates. He'd been quite struck by her at the altar as well. And then, of course, someone tells Giancotto, and they get caught together in Francesca's bedroom. And Paolo actually gets stuck in his attempt to escape down a ladder. But she thinks he's got away, so she lets Giancotto into the room, and then Giancotto lunges at Paolo with a sword, and Francesca steps between the two men and was killed instead. And her husband is like, oh no, I've killed my wife, and then goes, might as well kill you anyway, to Paolo, and then finishes it off. So yeah, quite a lot of blood and guts. I mean, it's a theme. It's a theme with lovers. There's definitely a lot of dying.
Yeah, it does tend to raise quite strong emotions of various kinds, as we will also see a bit later. Though you could definitely say that this is a good reason why the bride and groom should meet before the wedding. So
Yes, indeed.
they know what they're going to. You could say that
Yeah.
it's sort of selling a fake when it's a
And-
stand-in.
And yeah, poor Francesca has been very much tricked there. Been led to suppose that she's marrying a man that she could love, and then actually been united to a horrible, horrible dude. And that explains, really, if that's the account that Dante would have had, which we might presume that it was, why he feels that Francesca's story is so, so sad that he faints
Yeah.
again. When the second faint happened, I sort of wondered, is Dante going to keep doing this?
It does take the mind a bit to the soy boy thing. But I do think it was a bit more of a usual term to use back in the day. I have seen it in a few stories where it's not only the ladies who are swooning, but also a few men. So, yeah, but I do get the image of someone putting their hands to the forehead, just going, oh. So it does become a bit comical when it comes to men. But
I mean, on the whole, they seem to have felt things more deeply in those days.
yeah, we do tend to be a bit blasé in our days. Nihilistic and blasé on quite a few things. And then very, very, very emotional on other things. But they seem those stuff seems to be a bit contrived, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
Something they can place their misconceived emotions on, without abandoning their nihilism and cynicism and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a problem with, obviously, authenticity today, with a lot of subjectivity and moral values and decline of sacrality and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think Dante uses this couple as the main example of people trapped in the second circle, because it's not like any of them were really wanton and sleeping around and everything. It was a specific circumstance that had them do it. So because that is a point in Inferno, that those people we do meet in hell, they have redeeming factors about them. They're not the worst of the worst. So,
well, not until you get to the later circles, I suppose. But I guess Dante's trying to tell us, there, but for the greater God go I. And trying to inform people that through falling to quite ordinary temptations, they can end up in a bad situation and de facto being a bad person.
yeah.
But yeah, there's some other people in here whom, it might not on first glance be apparent why they're here. Or you might not know who they are. So Another one you might not have heard of is Dido, who was married to a guy called Sychaeus. And they were the king and queen of Tyre. And the brother Pygmalion killed both of them in order to get hold of their wealth. And now, then the ghost of her husband appeared to her again, and he told her where all of the treasure of their kingdom had been. And then she took all the treasure, ran, sought her fortune in a safer place, and then she turns up in Libya. And then she got possession of the place where Carthage was to be built. And she laid the foundation of Carthage and made good progress on the structure. And then the Trojan Aeneas gets shipwrecked on her shores. And, you know, he's really famous. He has a good name. He's good looking, and that is something that really entices her. And she feasts him in his company. And she falls in love with him. And she esteemed him as her husband. And then, of course, Aeneas has to go away again. And it's necessary then to pursue other designs. And he has to leave suddenly. And because she misses him so much, she actually eventually kills herself out of missing him. And that's another thing as well with Cleopatra. She's another woman who killed herself because, of course, she seduced Julius Caesar, then Mark Antony, who killed himself when he thought that she was dead. And then she tried to seduce Octavian to make peace, but that didn't work. So she just kills herself with an asp in the mausoleum she has built for herself.
Yeah, well,
Which
maybe better than being killed. I don't know. It might seem like that at
Probably.
least.
I mean, it's been brought up about why this then doesn't land them in a different circle of hell. But there's a theory about that. And that's because the love was the motivating force for the sin. And also, a person seems to be judged by his own standards in Dante's hell. So the standards of the society in which he lived. And in classical times, suicide wasn't actually considered a sin. Or at least in certain circumstances, it wasn't. So there was, I don't know about you, I think there's definitely more of a perception that suicide is sometimes honorable
Yeah.
in classical mythology.
Yeah, it does seem like it. And of course, it's the well-known aspect of traditional Japanese culture with, what's it called again? I don't remember what it's called. But yeah, when you ritualistic take your own life. That is, I suppose, the most well-known example of that. and you could argue, or there are theories at least, that there was an Aryan influence on the Japanese, way, way, way back in the days.
It can be argued for a lot of places that there was Aryan influence.
Yeah. There is one particular tribe in Japan who have a bit more Aryan features. Basically, their looks is a bit different from most of the other classes, and that the martial arts and stuff like that come from the Aryans.
The Ainu. The Ainu.
Yeah, I think that's what they're called. Everyone knows I'm terrible with names, so I don't remember stuff like that. But I do think it was the Ainu. You know, they have their facial features are a bit more Aryan. They have more facial hair growth and stuff like that. So it definitely seems like they have a genetic influence from somewhere.
Definitely very interesting that they've sort of inherited the same attitudes as the ancient Indo-Europeans towards the concept of suicide. Of course, Achilles ends up in this circle of hell as well because of the whole thing with Polyxena and falling in love with her and trying to make peace between Troy and Greece and being lured to his death by love of her. I guess he's seen as a betrayer of his country for love there.
Yeah.
And Semiramis, just a general symbol of promiscuity and lustfulness in the Middle Ages. She was an empress of, goodness, I forget where. I think it might have been somewhere near Iran. But yeah, it was claimed that she had an incestuous relationship with her son and then passed a law to legitimize parent-child marriages.
Oh, how lovely.
Yep. Yeah, so there's a bit of actual historical debate about whether she did that and who she was. But it's certainly not something to get into now. But that's a basic rundown of who is actually in hell. Except that Dante name drops one particularly famous legendary pair of lovers whose story we could probably get into now.
Indeed.
Tristan and Isolde. Tristan was born into an important Cornish family, the son of the brave knight Rivelin, brother of King Mark of Cornwall, and his beautiful wife, Blanchefleur. As knights often are, however, Rivelin was called upon to go to war, and the sad news came back that he had been slain. His wife Blanchefleur was so heartbroken at the news of his death that she stressed herself immensely, and to add to this, she was with child. The stress affected the poor woman dreadfully. She spent 3 whole days in labour before giving birth to Tristan. The baby Tristan, in absence of a father, was raised by the faithful followers of Rivelin as if he had been their own. He grew into a skilful and charming nobleman, with a flair for the arts and music. Tristan, an accomplished young man, was soon noticed by King Mark of Cornwall, and made part of the court. After being properly introduced, he was overjoyed to find Tristan was his dear brother's son, for they had never met prior to his brother's untimely demise. and immediately he made Tristan a knight. Tristan was very grateful to his uncle, and loved him like a father, and soon became King Mark's most skilled knight. At this time, King Mark was much troubled with a great foe. The tyrannical Morholt, brother of the Queen of Ireland, was constantly haranguing Cornwall for tribute to be paid to the Irish crown. This was much more than the little kingdom could afford. King Mark beseeched his nephew and defender to stand as champion for the tiny state, and Tristan agreed to be his champion. He was to go head-to-head with Cornwall's oppressor in single combat on the remote St. Sampson's Isle in order to release his people from the debt. The battle between those two was fierce, for they were well matched in skill, but eventually Tristan overcame the Irishman, stabbing him in the skull and mortally wounding him. As he did so, a piece of his blade broke off and lodged in the prince's head. However, Morholt had one last shot at vengeance. The despicable fiend had poisoned the tip of his spear, and even as he lay dying, plunged the blade into Tristan's side. The poison was slow and agonizing, and Tristan suffered with unimaginable pain, waiting for the release of death. He had become despondent and resigned, until one day he heard of Queen Iseult in Ireland. Queen Iseult could heal any wound. She was Tristan's only hope, but he had killed her brother. He must seek her healing arts, he decided, but he must remain incognito. When Tristan arrived, providing a fake name, Queen Iseult was moved to pity him at once. So pale and sickly did the once brave knight appear. She cured Tristan of his terrible wound, and he began to heal. If Tristan had only known that this was to be but the start of his troubles. During this time of convalescence, he became close to Isolde, Iseult's beautiful daughter, who, as the knight regained his strength and vigour, thought him rather handsome. However, it was not long before the body of Morholt was returned to his native land, and Queen Iseult, upon sadly examining the body of her brother, noticed that the piece of metal in his skull matched the chink in the blade of the young knight. It was exactly the same size. The expression of the queen made her displeasure known, and Tristan fled the place at once. The news of Tristan's survival reached his uncle, and on his return to Cornwall, Tristan was made King Mark's closest companion. As the years passed, Tristan became concerned that his uncle was unmarried, and therefore had no son to inherit his kingdom. It was not at all fitting for a king to die without an heir. Then Tristan remembered Isolde. Loyal servant as he was, he thought of her only in the light that she would be a fitting bride for any king, and that through King Mark's marriage to her, peace might be made between Cornwall and Ireland. He returned to Ireland to ask her if she would have his uncle's hand. Isolde's mother, Queen Iseult, although grieved by the death of her brother, told her daughter to marry Mark, as their son would be king of both Cornwall and Ireland. However, the queen worried about Mark's age. How was a beautiful young thing like Isolde to learn to love the not ugly, but certainly not young and handsome, King Mark? To ensure the wedding would go ahead, Queen Iseult prepared a love potion. Before Isolde and Tristan departed for Cornwall, Queen Iseult gave the love potion, disguised in a wine bottle, to Brangwain, Isolde's maid, with strict instructions that Isolde and King Mark were to drink it together. On the journey from Ireland, Tristan and Isolde at one point became thirsty. Of course, they had provisions enough for many days, for travelling from Ireland to Cornwall is a long trip. However, in searching the ship for refreshing wine, they chanced upon the potion, opened the bottle, and sat together to drink it. Scarcely did the liquid touch their lips, so that they did not even have time to register that the taste was different from wine, were they madly in love. As Brangwain entered the chamber, she stared in mute horror, then, stammeringly, confessed her instructions from the queen. Out of loyalty, Tristan insisted Isolde go ahead with the marriage to his uncle, in spite of his feelings towards her, which were overwhelming, to the point where he felt he might die, were he never to look upon her again. When King Mark met Isolde, he immediately fell in love with her beauty, and the two were married. However, still under the compelling influence of the potion, bolstered by a degree of natural affection that had already existed between the two, Isolde and Tristan could not resist each other, and met secretly behind King Mark's back. The lovers endeavored to be discreet, but could barely keep away from each other the one night. People began to be suspicious. Several of Mark's followers accused the two of adultery, but they always pleaded their innocence. Eventually, King Mark had lost all patience for their flimsy excuses. The mounting accusations were humiliating beyond belief. He would not be cuckolded. He, ignorant of any potion, was most angered by the betrayal of Tristan, and banished him from his kingdom forever. However, he could not bring himself to be angry with his radiant love Isolde, and she remained his wife. Tristan left Cornwall, and served many different kings and fought in many battles. He eventually settled in Brittany, where he married a woman who was also called Isolde, Isolde of the White Hands. Tristan, however, could not forget his Irish Isolde, and his love for her meant that he never consummated his marriage to Isolde of the White Hands, who could hardly bear the whispers of all the neighbourhood, for it was an open secret that he had no real desire for her. His love for his Irish Isolde was too much for Tristan, and he soon returned to Cornwall to see her again. She was cross and shed many tears when she learned he had married, but soon forgave him. After all, she was too. The love potion the two had taken all those years ago still had them firmly in its grasp, and they fell into each other's arms. The lovers spent many blissful days together, although they took care to hide Tristan's presence from King Mark. Eventually, Tristan acknowledged that he couldn't stay in his uncle's kingdom. He told Isolde that he would have to return to his wife, Isolde in Brittany. She wept bitterly at his going, but on his journey home, disaster struck. Tristan was caught up in yet another battle, and received a lethal wound. He returned to Brittany in failing health. He sent for his love, Irish Isolde, knowing that only she could heal him and save his life, having learned the arts from her mother. Tristan was racked with doubts. Surely she would not see him again, after he had left her for a second time. He told his messenger to go fetch Isolde, and bring her back from Cornwall, if he could, so that he could know if Isolde was on the returning ship. He told them to hoist a white sail if Isolde was on board, or a black sail if she wasn't. When the messenger got to Isolde, she immediately agreed to travel to see Tristan. Isolde also knew that only her love could heal his wound and save his life. However, before she could get to him, Tristan's wife found out what was happening. She flew into a jealous rage, realizing that Tristan's heart would always be with his Irish Isolde. Isolde of the White Hands played the part of the concerned wife, staying near to Tristan, but this was merely so she could be there when the ship arrived. She saw the white sails hoisted on the returning ship at the messenger, signaling that Irish Isolde had come. Her love for Tristan had endured, and she wished to save him. Then the Breton woman, Isolde of the White Hands, turned straight round and told Tristan that the ship was flying a black sail. Irish Isolde was not coming to see him. How could he have been so foolish as to think so? Tristan was devastated. His only love, it seemed, had spurned to apply her healing arts, and left him to die. The grief of such a thought overwhelmed him, and his faltering heartbeat stilled, as all the will and energy of life left his body. Just moments later, the ship had landed, and Isolde came running towards them, slowed, and then stopped, silent and stunned. Her lover was dead. Isolde sank to her knees, screaming and wailing over Tristan's lifeless form, as with increasing grief she realized that she had been only moments away from saving him. She wrapped her arms around him, and felt the life drain from her body. Isolde collapsed next to Tristan, and died in his arms of her broken heart.
So, a well-known tragic love story. And it definitely is tragic in many ways.
For sure. For sure. It always ends tragically, although I have to say, I've had a bit of a time determining what is actually meant to be the plot. Because everything about the character of Tristan and the spelling sort of varies a great deal from author to author. And there's two traditions of it, the courtly tradition of it and the common tradition of it. And those were written by a couple of French poets.
Yeah, well, that do seem to be
Sorry,
the
I had a
case.
cough there.
That can happen. Well, it does seems to be the case with many of the stories from King Arthur's court. There are so many variants in it, and stories from different places, different classes and everything, so it can be a bit hard to distinguish what is what. And I have also come across the theory that Lancelot was the creation of one specific guy. So some people then think that he shouldn't really be part of the Arthurian canon and everything. So yeah.
Okay. Well, it does get complicated. I mean, what's definitely agreed is defeats Morholt, travels to Ireland, brings back Isolt, for King Mark, ingests love potion. There's disagreement as to whether this lasts a lifetime in the courtly branch, or the effects wane after 3 years in the common branch. Then there's disagreement as to whether they ingest it accidentally, or whether the potion's maker instructs Isolt to share it with Mark, but then she deliberately gives it to Tristan instead. And Isolt does marry Mark, but yeah, they're forced by the spell to seek one another as lovers. And yeah, there's definitely always as well the marriage to Isolde of the White Hands. Although in quite a lot of tales, of course, there's a lot of shenanigans between the leaving of Cornwall and this, which I had to sort of abridge there. Very summarized.
Yeah, I think the lesson from that part of the story is not to find someone who in some way resembles a previous love, but isn't able to live up to the original person.
Absolutely.
That does tend to lead to disaster.
Well, always, yeah, because then you are chasing someone based on an idea you have of what they are, which they can never live up to because they are their own person, and probably you're also putting your previous love on a pedestal that they don't quite deserve either, because they're not some angel or something, they are a human.
Yeah. They're not an idol or just an image or anything. They, as you say, they are their own person. They have their own personality and all of that, and should be loved for who they are, not for some image you have in your mind.
Exactly. I mean, you can understand kind of why Isolde of the White Hands then does it. It's not excusable, but you can understand how jealous and humiliated she was when the marriage was not even consummated.
Yeah, though maybe seeking an annulment might have been a better way to go about it.
It might have been, yeah, she acted with passion.
Yeah, but as I say, it is understandable.
So, what I find particularly interesting, I mean, about this version in particular, is that Tristan and Isolde do know they are under an illusion. They've been told by Brangwain, oops, you just drank a love potion. But they choose not to try and break it. They don't go and think, oh, well, we need to seek whatever the cure is for a love potion then.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It's an interesting choice to make. What do you make of that?
You could argue that the feelings were already there, so the potion became just a pretext for acting on it and then not leaving it behind. That's how I tend to read it.
Yeah, they seem to have like an attraction towards each other as well. But it's an interesting point that we can factually know that something is illusory or pointless, and yet still choose it because it's pleasant. And then worry ourselves or pine away over the loss of the thing and what it represented to us.
Yeah.
And they do kind of make their happiness dependent on one another, when it shouldn't necessarily be, really.
Yeah, well, that does tend to be the case for couples. That they, in particular, where the feelings are very, very strong, that they really become dependent on the other. So when if the relationship then falls apart for whatever reason, whether it's a breakup, divorce, or death, then at least for one person it is extremely difficult to handle it. If not both, if both of them are still alive, naturally. So yeah, I do know of some people who, at least for many years, didn't seem to get over a past relationship. Still pining away for that person, which is really, really sad. And I also know of one man who, after his first marriage fell apart, he remarried with a woman who was literally the doppelganger of his ex-wife.
Ooh.
I don't know if they were similar in personality, but definitely in looks. So yeah, I do wonder how that turned out. It's been a few years since I heard it, so
yeah, it could just be that he had a type, perhaps.
Yeah, that is possible.
But yeah, I feel like when you're very dependent on other humans for your own happiness, that's not a good place to be in. And I wonder if, I think that maybe people with a strong religious faith and a belief that things happen in the universe for a reason are probably better equipped to get through these things.
Yeah, it's striking a balance in my view. In that you need to depend on each other as a basis for the relationship, but not to the point where you end up being completely dependent on the person. You still need to retain a sense of self, and the ability to also rely on yourself. Religion is definitely one way of keeping that balance. But in the end, I do think it boils down to what's the best word for it? Strength of personality, perhaps. In that you're strong in yourself.
Self-confidence. Self-esteem.
Maybe
Self-realizing.
have a good grounding in who you are. you know who you are, you know what you can do, what you can't do, and everything like that. So, you know that worst come to worst, you will be fine. You know, whatever might happen. You know, if you lose your spouse to illness or an accident, you know that you will come through it in the end, even though it's very, very difficult. So, yeah, I think that is the balance to strike.
It's definitely an important thing to remember, you know, to not forget yourself in a relationship
Yeah.
and who you are, and that you have a separate life.
Yeah, that it doesn't become 100% of your identity. I think that is the main trap.
Well, it can also then lead to problems in expecting the person to just automatically know what you're thinking, because they're basically you, right?
Yeah,
That illusion can quite soon be shattered, and then leave people in a situation where their relationship is not functioning on realistic expectations, because they sort of expect telepathy.
yeah, or they end up expecting too much of the other person, and when that isn't fulfilled, you end up being resentful, which will poison the relationship. Or maybe your feelings aren't as strong for the other person than they are for you, and if you then end up in a breakup situation and you're just standing there and you know what the H happened, how can this person leave me and everything. So yeah, in that you can perhaps become a bit navel gazing in your own feelings, so you don't really see what's going on with the other person. So yeah,
That's true. I mean, another aspect that I'd like to pick up on about Tristan and Isolde is maybe about a sort of warning, an allegory about leaving young men and women together unsupervised.
yeah, that is also a point in the story.
I mean, it's definitely something we've kind of forgotten about.
Yeah,
Those sort of forces. And I guess we've been afforded almost the luxury to forget, because you know there are several. It's not really a luxury, is it, though? Because like, sure, we can escape some of the main consequences of desire these days, but all the subtler consequences of improper romantic unions are still very much there.
I think these days it's almost actively encouraged to discard that.
Yes.
And just act on what you feel like in the moment because you feel like it. And not really thinking of the long-term consequences. And, you know, I'm not necessarily talking pregnancy, but the emotional toll it takes.
It does definitely take an emotional toll.
And yeah, specifically for women.
Unfortunate. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. In previous generations, desire to escape the bonds of society that I felt were choking in many ways, or led to believe that they were choking, they have gone in the complete opposite, which seems to be the case in so many areas these days. that they have gone way too far and not really thought about the consequences. And even if you yourself is a type who can live like that without too much consequence, that doesn't mean that's the case for others. They can be a very different personality type, which will take damage from it.
For the vast majority of women, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, which is actually quite a good segue into the couple we have alluded to earlier.
Yes, it is.
So perhaps we should turn it over to the words of Alexander Pope in quite a good poem, I would say. So let's hear the story of Eloisa and Abelard. From Eloisa to Abelard by Alexander Pope. In these deep solitudes and awful cells, where heavenly pensive contemplation dwells, and ever musing melancholy reigns, what means this tumult in a vestal's veins? Why rove my thoughts beyond this last retreat? Why fills my heart its long forgotten heat? Yet I love. From Abelard it came, and Eloisa yet must kiss the name. Dear fatal name, rest ever unrevealed, nor past his lips in holy silence sealed. Hide it, my heart, within that close disguise, where mixed with gods his loved ideal lies. Oh, write it, not my hand. The name appears already written. Wash it out, my tears. In vain lost, Eloisa weeps and prays. Her heart still dictates, and her hand obeys. Relentless walls, whose darksome round contains repentant sighs and voluntary pains. Ye rugged rock, which holy knees have worn, ye grots and caverns, shagged with horrid thorn, shrines where the vigils pale-eyed virgins keep, and pitying saints whose statues learn to weep. Though cold like you, unmoved and silent grown, I have not yet forgot myself to stone. All is not heaven's why Abelard has part, still rebel nature holds out half my heart, nor prayers nor fasts its stubborn pulse restrain, nor tears for ages taught to flow in vain. Soon as thy letters trembling I unclose, that well-known name awakens all my woes, a name forever sad, forever dear, still breathed in sighs, still ushered with a tear. I tremble too wherever my own I find, some dire misfortune follows close behind. Line after line my gushing eyes overflow, led through a sad variety of woe, now warm in love, now writhing in my bloom, lost in a convent's solitary gloom. There stern religion quenched the unwilling flame, there died the best of passions, love and fame. Yet write, or write me all, that I may join griefs to thy griefs, and echo sighs to thine. Nor foes nor fortune take this power away, and is my Abelard less kind than they? Tears still are mine, and those I need not spare. Love but demands whatever else were shed in prayer. No happier task these faded eyes pursue, to read and weep is all they now can do. Then share thy pain, allow that sad relief. Ah, more than share it, give me all thy grief. Heaven first taught letters for some wretched's aid, some banished lover or some captive maid. They live, they speak, they breathe what love inspires, warm from the soul and faithful to its fires. The virgin's wish without her fears impart, excuse the blush and pour out all the heart. Speed the soft intercourse from soul to soul, and waft a sigh from Indus to the pole. Thou know'st how guiltless first I met thy flame, When love approached me under friendship's name, my fancy formed thee of angelic kind, some emanation of the all-beauteous mind. Those smiling eyes, attempting every ray, shone sweetly lambent with celestial day. Guiltless I gazed, heaven listened while you sung, and truths divine came mended from that tongue. From lips like those, what precepts failed to move? Too soon they taught me 'twas no sin to love. Back through the paths of pleasing sense I ran, nor wished an angel whom I loved a man. Dim and remote the joys of saints I see, nor envy them that heaven I lose to thee. How oft, when pressed to marriage, have I said, curse on all laws but those which love has made. Love, free as air at sight of human ties, spread his light wings and in a moment flies. Let wealth, let honour wait the wedded dame, august her deed and sacred be her fame. Before true passion all those views remove, fame, wealth and honour, what are you to love? The jealous god when we profane his fires, those restless passions in revenge inspires, and bids them make mistaken mortals groan, who seek in love for aught but love alone. Should at my feet the world's great master fall, himself, his throne, his world, I'd scorn them all. Not Caesar's empress would I deign to prove, no make me mistress to the man I love. If there yet be another name more free, more fond than mistress, make me that to thee. O happy state, when souls each other draw, when love is liberty and nature law, all then is full, possessing and possessed, no craving void left aching in the breast. Even thought meets thought, ere from the lips it part, and each warm wish springs mutual from the heart. This sure is bliss, if bliss on earth there be, and once the lot of Abelard and me. Alas, how changed, what sudden horrors rise! A naked lover bound and bleeding lies. Where was Eloise? Her voice, her hand, her poniard had opposed the dire command. Barbarian stay, that bloody stroke restrain. The crime was common, common be the pain. I can no more, by shame, by rage suppressed. Let tears and burning blushes speak the rest. Canst thou forget that sad, that solemn day, when victims at an altar's foot we lay? Canst thou forget what tears that moment fell, when warm in youth I bade the world farewell? As with cold lips I kissed the sacred veil, the shrines all trembled, and the lamps grew pale. Heaven scarce believed the conquest it surveyed, and saints with wonder heard the vows I made. Yet then, to those dread altars as I drew, not on the cross my eyes were fixed, but you. Not grace or seal, love only was my call, and if I lose thy love, I lose my all. Come with thy looks, thy words, relieve my woe, those still at least are left for thee to bestow. Still on thy breast enamoured let me lie, still drink delicious poison from thy eye, pant on thy lip, and to thy heart be pressed. Give all thou canst, and let me dream the rest. Ah, no, instruct me other joys to prize, with other beauties charm my partial eyes. Full in my view set all the bright abode, and make my soul quit Abelard for God. Ah, think at least thy flock deserves thy care, plants of thy hand, and children of thy prayer. From the false world in early youth they fled, by thee to mountains, wilds and desert led. You raised these hallowed walls, the desert smiled, and paradise was opened in the wild. No weeping orphan saw his father's sores, our shrines irradiate and emblaze the floors. No silver saints, by dying misers given, here bribe the rage of ill-requited heaven, but such plain roofs as piety could raise, and only vocal with the Maker's praise. In these lone walls, their days eternal bound, these moss-grown domes, with spiry turrets crowned, where awful arches made a noonday night, and the dim windows shed a solemn light. Thy eyes diffused a reconciling ray, and glimpse of glory brightened all the day. But now no face divine contentment wears, 'tis all blank sadness, or continual tears. See how the force of other prayers I try, O pious fraud of amorous charity. But why should I on others' prayers depend? Come thou, my father, brother, husband, friend. Ah, let thy handmaid, sister, daughter move, and all those tender names in one, thy love. The darksome pines that over yon rocks reclined, wave high and murmured to the hollow wind. The wandering streams that shine between the hills, the grots that echo to the twinkling rills, the dying gales that pant upon the trees, the lakes that quiver to the curling breeze. No more these scenes my meditation aid, or lull the rest of visionary maid, but over the twilight groves and dusky caves, long-sounding aisles and intermingled graves, black melancholy sits, and round her throws a death-like silence and a dead repose. Her gloomy presence saddens all the scene, shades every flower and darkens every green, deepens the murmur of the falling floods, and breathes a browner horror on the woods. Yet here forever, ever must I stay, sad proof how well a lover can obey. Death, only death, can break the lasting chain, and here, even then, shall my coal dust remain. Here all its frailties, all its flames resign, and wait till 'tis no more sin to mix with thine. Ah, wretch, believed the spouse of God in vain, confessed within the slave of love and man. Assist me, heaven, but whence arose that prayer? Sprung it from piety or from despair? Even here, when frozen chastity retires, love finds an altar for forbidden fires. I ought to grieve, but cannot what I ought. I mourn the lover, not lament the fault. I view my crime, but kindle at the view, repent all pleasures and solicit new. Now turn to heaven, I weep my past offence. Now think of thee and curse my innocence. Of all affliction taught a lover yet, 'tis sure the hardest science to forget. How shall I lose the sin, yet keep the sense, and love the offender, yet detest the offence? How dare the object from the crime remove, or how to distinguish penitence from love? Unequal task, a passion to resign, for hearts so touched, so pierced, so lost as mine, ere such a soul regains its peaceful state. How often must it love, how often hate, how often hope, despair, resent, regret, conceal, disdain, do all things but forget? But let heaven seize it, all at once 'tis furred, not touched but rapt, not wakened but inspired. O come, O teach me nature to subdue, renounce my love, my life, myself, and you. Fill my fond heart with God alone, for he alone can rival, can succeed to thee. How happy is the blameless vestal's lot, the world forgetting, by the world forgot, eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, each prayer accepted and each wish resigned, labor and rest that equal periods keep, obedient slumbers that can wake and weep, desires composed, affections ever even, tears that delight and sighs that waft to heaven. Grace shines around her with serenest beams, and whispering angels prompt her golden dreams. For her the unfading rose of Eden blooms, and wings of seraphs shed divine perfumes. For her the spouse prepares the bridal ring, for her white virgins hymeneals sing. To sounds of heavenly harps she dies away, and melts in visions of eternal day. Far other dreams my erring soul employ, far other raptures of unholy joy, when at the close of each sad sorrowing day, fancy restores what vengeance snatched away. Then conscience sleeps, and leaving nature free, all my loose soul unbounded springs to thee. O burst, Dear horrors of all conscious night, how glowing guilt exalts the keen delight, provoking demons all restraint remove, and stir within me every source of love. I hear thee, view thee, gaze over all thy charms, and round thy phantom glue my clasping arms. I wake, no more I hear, no more I view, the phantom flies me as unkind as you. I call aloud, it hears not what I say. I stretch my empty arms, it glides away. To dream once more I close my willing eyes. Ye soft illusions, their deceits arise. Alas, no more, methinks we wandering go through dreary wastes, and weep each other's woe, where round some mouldering tower pale ivy creeps, and low-browed rocks hang nodding over the deeps. Sudden you mount, you beckon from the skies. Clouds interpose, waves roar, and winds arise. I shriek, start up, the same sad prospect find, and wake to all the griefs I left behind. For thee the fates, severely kind, ordain a cool suspense from pleasure and from pain. Thy life a long dread calm of fixed repose, no pulse that riots, and no blood that glows. Still as the sea ere winds were taught to blow, or moving spirit bade the waters flow. Soft as the slumbers of a saint forgiven, and mild as opening gleams of promised heaven. Come, Abelard, for what hast thou to dread? The torch of Venus burns not for the dead. Nature stands checked, religion disapproves. Even thou art cold, yet Eloisa loves. Ah, hopeless, lasting flames, like those that burn to light the dead and warm the unfruitful urn. What scenes appear wherever I turn my view? The dear ideas, where I fly, pursue. Rise in the grove, before the altar rise. Stain all my soul, and wanton in my eyes. I waste the matin lamp in sighs for thee. Thy image steals between my God and me. Thy voice I seem in every hymn to hear. With every bead I drop too soft a tear. When from the censer clouds of fragrance roll, and swelling organs lift the rising soul. One thought of thee puts all the pomp to flight. Priests, tapers, temples swim before my sight. In seas of flame my plunging soul is drowned, while altars blaze and angels tremble round. While prostrate here in humble grief I lie, kind virtuous drops just gathering in my eye. While praying, trembling, in the dust I roll, and dawning grace is opening on my soul. Come, if thou darst, all charming as thou art, oppose thyself to heaven, dispute my heart. Come, with one glance of those deluding eyes, blot out each bright idea of the skies. Take back that grace, those sorrows and those tears. Take back my fruitless penitence and prayers. Snatch me just mounting from the blessed abode, assist the fiance, and tear me from my God. No, fly me, far as pole from pole. Rise Alps between us, and whole oceans roll. Ah, come not, write not, think not once of me, nor share one pang of all I felt for thee. Thy oaths I quit, thy memory resign. Forget, renounce me, hate whatever was mine. Fair eyes and tempting looks, which yet I view. Long loved, adored ideas, all adieu. O grace serene, O virtue heavenly fair, divine oblivion of low-thoughted care, fresh blooming hope, gay daughter of the sky, and faith our early immortality. Enter each mild, each amicable guest, receive and wrap me in eternal rest. See in her cell sad Eloisa spread, propped on some tomb, a neighbor to the dead. In each low wind methinks a spirit calls, and more than echoes talk along the walls. Here as I watched the dying lamps around, from yonder shrine I heard a hollow sound, Come, sister, come, it said or seemed to say. Thy place is here, sad sister, come away. Once like thyself I trembled, wept and prayed. Love's victim then, though now a sainted maid. But all is calm in this eternal sleep. Here grief forgets to groan and love to weep. Even superstition loses every fear. For God, not man, absolves our frailties here. I come, prepare your roseate brows, celestial palms, and ever-blooming flowers. Thither, where sinners may have rest, I go, where flames refined in breast's seraphic glow. Thou, Abelard, the last sad office pay, and smooth my passage to the realms of day. See my lips tremble and my eyeballs roll, suck my last breath and catch my flying soul. Ah, no, in sacred vestments mayst thou stand, the hallowed taper trembling in thy hand. Present the cross before my lifted eye. Teach me at once, and learn of me to die, and then thy once loved Eloisa see. It will be then no crime to gaze on me. See for my cheek the transient roses fly. See the last sparkle languish in my eye, till every motion, pulse and breath be over, and even my Abelard be loved no more. O death all eloquent, you only prove what dost we dote on when this man we love. Then too, when fate shall thy fair frame destroy, that cause of all my guilt and all my joy, in trance ecstatic may thy pangs be drowned. Bright clouds descend, and angels watch thee round. From opening skies may streaming glories shine, and saints embrace thee with a love like mine. May one kind grave unite each hapless name, and graft my love immortal on thy fame. Then, ages hence, when all my woes are over, when this rebellious heart shall heat no more, if ever chance two wandering lovers bring to Paraclete's white walls and silver springs, over the pale marble shall they join their heads, and drink the falling tears each other sheds. Then sadly say, with mutual pity moved, oh, may we never love as these have loved. From the full choir, when loud hosannas rise, and swell the pomp of dreadful sacrifice, amid that scene, if some relenting eye glance on the stone where our cold relics lie, devotion's self shall steal a thought from heaven, one human tear shall drop and be forgiven, and sure, if fate some future bard shall join in sad similitude of griefs to mine, condemned whole years in absence to deplore, an image charms he must behold no more. Such if there be, who love so long, so well, let him our sad or tender story tell. The well-sung woes will soothe my pensive ghost. He best can paint them, who shall feel them most. So, that was the story of Eloise and Abelard, or at least what Eloise felt for Abelard. They were two historical persons with quite a sad fate. Abelard is Peter Abelard, who lived from 1079 to 1142, and Eloise, her last name isn't known, but she was a famous nun and scholar. She lived from 1100 to 1163 or 64. And definitely an interesting story in a lot of ways. Abelard was a famous scholar, and philosopher, and theologian, poet, composer, and musician, and definitely quite a quarrelsome person. So he ended up starting his own school in rivalry to the school of Notre Dame. But by 1115 he had gained a reputation enough for his scholarly work that he was actually employed at Notre Dame. He was a minor nobleman who chose to be a scholar instead of a knight, like his father was. And Eloise was probably an orphan. At least she grew up in a convent, and by 1115 she lived with her uncle, who was a canon at Notre Dame. And she and Abelard met, and some say that he fell for her immediately and pursued her, including himself, though Eloise herself said it was a mutual interest. He gained the position as her tutor. She was already very renowned for her scholarly mind. Being raised in a convent, she did have some education, in particular renowned for her ability in Greek and Hebrew and old languages. But being her tutor might not have been the best idea. They started an affair, which her uncle Albert discovered and tried to separate them, but they still kept seeing each other in secret until, predictably, Eloise fell pregnant. At this point, Abelard sent her to his sister in the countryside, where she gave birth to their son, which she called Astrolabe. Yes, that is the navigational tune.
What a name.
Yeah, literally named for a navigation tool from Persia. We do hear of people complaining about weird names today, so I do wonder what he said.
I do wonder, yes.
Yeah, he was known as Peter Astrolabe, so I don't know, maybe he went by Peter or something. But of course, Eloise's uncle was furious. So Abelard agreed to marry Eloise to appease him. But Eloise wasn't that convinced. In general, she wasn't a big fan of marriage as an institution. She was definitely an outlier. But she agreed to it on the condition that it would be secret, and it is thought that it was also for Abelard's sake, because the church was very much involved in all kinds of education at that time, and it was around the time when the church started to impose celibacy on the clergyman and therefore also teachers like Abelard at Notre Dame. And if he then got married, it would probably jeopardize his future within the church. So they agreed to that. Eloise returned to Paris, leaving their son behind, and they got married. But her uncle quickly went back on that promise and started talking openly about their marriage. So, of course, Eloisa vehemently denied it. But the uncle seems to be a bit of a temperamental guy, so he got furious and reportedly very abusive. So probably he started to hit her around and everything, because she still lived with her uncle because she wasn't officially married. So Abelard sent her back to the convent where she had grown up, in Argenteuil. And that made her uncle even more furious because he stole his niece or something. But also it's thought he suspected Abelard of discarding her altogether. So he hired a gang of brutes who one night broke into Abelard's chambers and castrated him. Which you might say was a bit of an overreaction.
Ooh, just a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe suspected him of either abandoning her or killing her.
Abandoning her.
Like abandoning her, yeah.
Setting her aside in a convent. And then also ruining her prospects for the future. But he could have talked to both Abelard and her instead of castrating Abelard, in my opinion.
Yes.
Um,
Indeed. I mean, it honestly makes sense. Because, at the time, they really didn't have much option. There was returning to the care of Fulbert, who was smacking her around. There was leaving Paris to stay with Abelard's family. Or divorcing and remarrying. And that would really likely have to be to a non-intellectual because scholars were really increasingly expected to be celibate. And so religious order was really the one place where Eloise could actually do what she seemed inclined to, which was to have an academic career.
Yeah, well, there's no indication at this time that Abelard was planning to setting her aside. It might have been a temporary solution to get her away from her abusive uncle. But the goons were punished for their crime, and Fulbert was not excommunicated, but he was shunned socially because it was a really shameful thing to do. So he left Paris for a lot of years. There's no record of him being there for many, many years. So, yeah, he kind of fled. Of course, Abelard went into quite a depression because of what happened. That is definitely understandable. So he became a monk and basically closed himself off in a monastery in Paris.
If you've done being castrated, I don't suppose you've got many other options other than monk.
Not only that, but it was definitely seen as a very shameful thing to be a castrati. It was really looked down upon, even if it wasn't its own fault, so to speak. A few other scholars he had a rivalry with, literally made fun of him in public because of it. And Abelard was a hugely successful teacher. His renown was enormous. He had thousands of students wanting to learn from him and everything. So, yeah. And of course, there was a lot of questions about what had happened, and he didn't want to get into that. It's a bit unknown if he convinced Eloise to become a nun or not. She did take the veil, but at that time it was also one of the solutions for her. and her agony about what happened is clearly shown in this poem. They are based on letters between Eloise and Abelard. They did keep in touch some years later, and they concerned both the feeling they had for each other and philosophy. It also seems like Abelard needed to find a reason for this happening. They both saw it as a punishment from God. So he, in his autobiography, he say that it was pure lust that had him pursue Eloise, that he forced himself on her, which of course today has all kinds of feminists being quote-unquote uncomfortable with the whole thing. But Eloise vehemently denies it, even to the point where she says she was the instigator in seducing him. But it's clear that from her point of view, it was a meeting of kindred spirits, that it was true love. So way much deeper than just passion and physical attraction. Both of them also had quite an interesting view on the nature of sin, in that they thought what the person intended to do was central to whether or not it was a sin. So, for example, their affair, from Eloise's point of view, wasn't a sin, because it was true love. But of course, the circumstances ended up being a bit sinful, out of wedlock and everything. But she's clearly conflicted about that, repenting for something she viewed as pure and true is, of course, very difficult. And I do think it's a very interesting aspect when it comes to it, that, the intention behind an act should at least be a measure of the sin. You might do something wrong without meaning it.
Yeah.
So, if you go about your life as a wanton, then you definitely commit the act of sin. But if it is a relationship where the feelings are strong and pure and everything, then is it a sin or is it not? Sometimes it's the circumstances.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's a question. There certainly is an argument that a sin is less bad if a person is ignorant of committing it. I would say so. That seems logical to me.
Mm-hmm.
Or if a person is, like Francesca and Paolo. She believed she was marrying one guy. So does that technically mean that she made the oath to Paolo in the first place? I mean, one could say that she in spirit did. So I'm not sure that I agree with where she ends up placed as a heathen.
Yeah.
But it's complicated, really, to say whether or not she broke an oath there.
Mm-hmm. That is definitely a situation where it's hard to discern. It really depends on how you view it, and when it comes to God, how he views it. But can man really know that for sure? That's always the question. So yeah, it's definitely a story I empathize with when it comes to Eloise and Abelard. Alexander Pope wrote this poem in 1707, and at that point was the first time it got really well known in Britain of their story. Though it has been said that they were an inspiration for a lot of medieval love stories, that end in tragedy, and in particular the woman ends up taking the veil. So it definitely seems to have all the aspects of a tragedy. They both ended up being very successful within the church. Eloise ended up as an abbess, and in the end gained a position equivalent to bishop. Abelard was not that successful, but that was partly due to his nature. He wasn't really he was a bit disagreeable and tended to cause arguments with a lot of people, in particular with being a teacher, because he continued that at several times for the rest of his life. And that was in many ways secular, which then had objections from the church, because he was supposed to just do the theological stuff. And he at one point actually ended up being excommunicated because of it, though that was withdrawn. That was at the very end of his life. And after his death, his body was eventually transported to Eloise, who took care of it. And when she died 20 years later, there was a 20 years age difference between them. They were buried together, and then their remains were removed, eventually ending up in Paris. I don't remember the name of the graveyard, but it's a very famous one. And to this day, lovers go there and place flowers on the epitaph. But it's disputed whether both of them lie there, if it's just Abelard. Some say Eloise was moved later on. But it's definitely a story who has languished over the years, you could say, being kept alive. Now, I hope everyone is sitting down, because Eloise is actually a huge inspiration for the feminists. She, as I said, she was an outlaw. She was very intelligent. Yeah. She was very scholarly gifted. And her views on marriage and babies were definitely not what is expected of women. Just wanting to get married and have babies and everything. She just thought most women wanted to marry money and basically selling themselves to a husband, and would in a heartbeat sell themselves to a man who was better off if he was to come along. That might be the case for some, but not everyone. But I do think Eloise did the cardinal sin that many female outliers do, in that they view things very subjective. They don't fit into the expected role models. So instead of acknowledging that and everything, they want to change society, which isn't necessarily the best idea, as we can see these days. So yeah, definitely a proto-feminist, you could say. These ideas are really not new. They pop up every so often, again and again. Yeah, as Carlotta in YouTube was saying, believe all the women always.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly there's definitely a lot of, I guess, some resentment of the institution of marriage in this poem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's an interesting line about being a mistress and how that's a position that's dear in the poem. And it's almost like she doesn't care what status she has to him, as long as she can be in that relationship. She doesn't seem to have time for the whole social norms of the thing.
No, she really doesn't have high opinion of marriage. And not kids either, actually. One quote from her was asking how women can abide by the wails of babies. Basically, how can any woman stand a screaming baby? So maybe not the most child-friendly, though I don't think women like the sound, but they want to comfort the child and not become angry.
No, exactly. But yeah, not the most natural mother. I mean, what I like about this poem is the way it captures the very conflicted feelings. You know, that whole stanza where she's saying, you know, snatch me from heaven. No, wait, no. Mountains should rise up between us. I want oceans between us.
Yeah.
Don't come anywhere near me.
Yeah, I
And
like
it just sort of flips on a dime.
Yeah, it definitely reflects her conflicted emotions from being so much in love and ending up in a convent with a castrated husband. So obviously there's no future for that relationship. There is the part where, let us continue this and give me what you can and I will imagine the rest. Obviously hinting at his lack of manhood. And also, how can I separate the sin from the love? That one definitely was a good one. And it really is a lot of conflicting emotions there. I do think Eloisa was most suited for a convent. That institutions gave women the possibility of scholarly work and a way of surviving, which was a lot more difficult for women back then. Not impossible, but difficult. And instead of being reliant on a husband, because let's face it, not everyone are.
No, not everyone is, no.
No. So it really was the relationship with Abelard that sort of was her downfall, so to speak, when it comes to that. But she was very successful within the church. So, but I do think they loved each other for the rest of their lives. At least she did. So, yeah. And their son also ended up in the church. He was raised by his aunt. Because both of the parents ended up being cloistered very shortly after his birth. So, but with their connections, they were able to give him a position within the monasteries. So he died on the 29th or the 30th of October, but it's not known what year that was. But there are a few records of a Peter astrolabe. And it's a very unusual.
Any other Peter astrolabes?
No.
Oh dear.
Yeah. I think he died in a monastery in Bern, Switzerland, or something. So yeah.
I wonder then if Eloise ever did repent of the lost.
I don't think she did, because she considered it true love and hence not lost.
Yeah, because I think he sounds like he's saying it's lost to protect her, because it mentions him being attracted to her for her mind. That's not really lost, is it?
No. He did claim that it was lost, but that could be down to two aspects. One, and this really goes for both of them, which must have been really conflicting, in that the usual view at that time was that bad circumstances was a punishment from God, and him being castrated would definitely be a punishment for God in a society like that. It just doesn't just happen. So that might be one reason why he at one point says that he forced himself on her, justifying what happened to himself. But it could also have been to protect her, because there was Abbot Sugar, or Sugar, or however you pronounce it. I do find that name quite funny. But in any case, he had just appropriated her convent, and the church tended to see nuns as a bit loose, so to speak. So it might have been to protect her that he did it, or both. I definitely think it was also a personal thing for himself in dealing with his trauma and everything. So but I definitely see how Eloise would also see it as a punishment for God, and hence the relationship, maybe the illicit point of the relationship would be behind it. But again, as she also viewed it as true love, how could it be a sin? So yeah, conflict.
Exactly. And the poem does sum that up very, very nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sort of to finish tonight, we have a poem actually written by someone who is a regular viewer of the stream and a member of our chat room.
Mm-hmm.
And we liked it because it sort of sums up some of the problems with modern dating, we think.
Indeed, definitely a very good image of that. We're basically swimming in the lust of sin, you could say,
Definitely.
or the sin of lust, I meant to say. Sometimes I
Yes,
mix
sin of
words
lust.
up. Yeah, I tend to mix
Oh
up
dear.
the order of words at times, so yeah, it can be a bit funny. But let's hear that poem.
Foolish is he who does the courting, deluded in thought as kind of sporting. Flower to flower, smile to tear, without worry, care, and fear. True love is not, and ne'er truly sought. Fun and games, maiden names are all he forgot. By the tides do fare, still living without care, empty within, all with sin. Time is running thin, mind ever trapped by lust. Illusions hold, sorrows fold. Such things are for he who is foolish.
Definitely a good way of wording it. Today people seem to just chase after bodily satisfaction, and maybe at a bit of a too late of a time start to think more of settling down. Or perhaps thinking that the other person is thinking that way and so not committing. It really is a very
Exactly.
nuanced thing, I would say.
Yeah, people don't tend to go into things really thinking about long-term compatibility.
No, or wanting to take a long time to find out if they're compatible. After 1 or more years, they start to think about it and then rethinking and rethinking and rethinking. So that strong commitment isn't there. And so the relationship is more or less doomed to fall apart, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I suppose many of us in modern times have fallen to, going into a relationship based on initial new relationship feels and then later on realizing, oh, not the right person. Because we're so very encouraged to do so.
Yeah. Just follow your emotions everywhere, and that basically has you being tossed around on the wind, as Dante describes it very much. And how many times can you do that before you lose faith? How long can you keep hope alive of finding something true? I do think many lose that hope after a time. And then you might end up settled just because you don't want to be alone, which is maybe not the best basis for a relationship.
No, not really. I mean, in modern times, it seems to be considered odd if you haven't, you know, had at least 2 failures before a success in
Yeah,
dating.
yeah.
And then if you find a good person the first time round, that's looked upon as extremely weird these days, and they're like, everyone's like, they're not sure how you can possibly be sure because they don't know how to ask the questions about compatibility and about life views and life goals that are needed to be sure the first time round. And so for most modern people, it isn't really a thing that anyone even thinks possible.
Yeah, or thinking that there's always someone better out there that you will eventually meet. It might not even be a conscious thought, but an unconscious thought.
That is something that Hollywood has been very guilty for.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've all held men in our life up to unattainable Hollywood men who are basically designed to cater to everything that women want in a man, or romance novel protagonists and stuff like that. That is sort of the same thing for women as I think, the X-rated material freely available on the internet is for men, almost.
Yeah, it's definitely something that affects both men and women, slightly different way, and through different means, but that thought that there is always someone better out there, or that quote unquote suddenly one day you realize that you have settled and you're not happy, so therefore you leave or have an affair or something like that.
And because you don't feel happy, you're totally justified in breaking an oath, of course.
Yeah, of course.
It's not like, you can work on things and rediscover what attracted you to this person in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you can accept that you've made your bed and lie in it. You have to ultimately seek your own maximal happiness.
Yeah.
Therefore, the tingly new relationship feels have to last forever. And this is how you get stuff like polyamory.
Yeah. Sometimes you get to a point where reconciliation is impossible in a relationship, but hardly as often as we see today, I think. And then you end up with a situation where neither party really wants to commit, and we see what's happening there, and then people have perhaps friends who goes into some polyamorous stuff, and then they start to think, oh, I'm not really happy with my circumstance. Should we try that? I do know of relationships which has ended because one party suggested polyamorous relationship, and it's just and also literally because of well, I know someone that does it, and he does have a polyamorous relationship, and it sounds really good. Yeah, right.
Yeah, no. I mean, you can sort of read between the lines when you meet couples who are doing that. Usually, the girl, obviously, gets more extra interest than the dude. That's usually how it is. And so she's maybe got usually several extra partners on him. And maybe he's got one or can't find an extra partner. But he would be open to it. But, evolutionarily, it's easier for a woman to get men coming onto her if she's perceived as available, really.
Yeah. I'm actually very glad that I'm just too old for that to have surfaced, really. It wasn't really a thing when I was younger. That came later. So one of several times I feel like I was born in the nick of time.
I wouldn't say it was a thing when I was younger. When I was growing up, a lot of this stuff was only really just starting to emerge, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's sort of prior to the Great Awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Jules got some prospective girlfriend questions, such as, what's your favorite cuisine? How many genders are there? Should they be small animals? And do you have an urge to start fires? Good things to ascertain, I would
Mm-hmm.
say.
Get the
Sort of take
awkward
that, send it out as a
questions.
pre-date questionnaire.
Yeah. Get the awkward
Tell whether you're
questions out
wasting your time or not.
once. Yeah, get
Yeah.
those awkward questions out of the way at once.
So, voices, do you hear them? Sometimes. Okay, but you think it might be the neighbors. Fine. Dear.
Yeah. Maybe also ask what's your favorite hair color?
Oh. Yeah, that could be a sort of indication of tribal preferences, perhaps.
Yeah,
What if
well, you
she
might.
likes gingers?
Yeah, well, you might see it at once if she turns up with, I don't know, orange hair, or is it blue that is a bit more popular? I don't know.
Oh dear.
But
Well,
then you
that's-
know initially, so you don't really have to ask.
Some particularly bad behavior from Kalotopuric's friend there. That's not very good at all. No. Yeah, it just shows the state to which modern relationships and marriages are sort of degenerated.
Yeah, I've
think-
heard quite a few stories over the years, so
Jules said gingers are the supreme beings, the masters, and YouTube for some reason retracted this message.
unless he retracted it himself, of course.
Maybe he didn't wanna say that.
Maybe.
He
Oh,
did.
he did.
He
Yeah.
retracted it.
Yeah.
Like YouTube wants to. I was like, does YouTube want to stop the truth getting out about the gingers, the ginger overlords? who are
Yeah,
running the
probably.
world from the deep state?
Yeah, probably.
Probably. Oh, Stontian Dogs one. Yep. He confirms it. He confirms it. Oh dear.
Yeah. Well, this has been our dive into the second circle of hell. Definitely an interesting one.
Definitely. I mean, I think the main takeaway is that, yeah, they do really choose to be there. And none of these lovers seem like they would have it any other way.
Yeah,
In fact,
well,
they'd spit in the face of all the glories of heaven if they could have their love.
yeah. Well, I would say it's one of the more difficult sins to discern because it's so subjective. When it involves your raw emotions, they are harder to control than, for example, gluttony, I would say. And it's such a huge part of the human experience of being a human. the feeling of love and being loved and all of that it's so tremendously important. And there
Hmm.
I think there's been studies showing that heartbreak isn't just a phrase of words. It can actually induce physical damage to your heart, which definitely say a lot about how deeply those emotions are felt.
Yeah. I mean, there is recorded cases of old couples, so it's definitely a very powerful emotion, and the stress of breakup or loss of a lover, um, possibly could do that to someone.
Yeah, I would say
Lending a
so.
literal slant to the words, yeah.
Yeah. So I hope we have given you some food for thought this evening. Um,
Hopefully so.
yeah. Bertie Bassett, thank you for the diamond. Second Circle of Hell was surprisingly enjoyable. Cheers. We are
Nice.
glad you liked it. And thank you
And
so much for the diamond.
thank you indeed. Yeah, I mean, like I say, really complicated concept, because of course the lines between lust and love, they do become quite blurry.
Yeah, that
But
would
we're
only
glad.
it would only reveal itself after a certain amount of time when the hormones start to settle down a bit and you can actually discern what
Yes.
is hormones and what is actually feelings. So yeah, take it slowly, people. Just take it slowly. Don't jump into things. Take your time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that is all we've got time for tonight.
Yeah.
And we're glad you've enjoyed it there.
Yeah. Next week we will turn out to sea again
Yes.
with
Gonna be
ghostly ships. Ghostly ships. It should be interesting and quite piratey, probably. So
Yes.
yeah, tune in next Sunday, same place, same time, and have a wonderful evening and a wonderful week. And see you then.
If you wish, tune in to Scott's Armor, who I believe has given us a shout out, so thank you for that, Scott's Armor. And Bard is quite often on that stream, so you can pop the link for that in the chat. But thank you very much to them for shouting both us and Bard out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And with that, good night, folks.
Good night.
Good night.